Two men. One was a Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA, who retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. The other was a gas station attendant and janitor from Vermont, who died with $8 million in the bank. How is it that a man who repaired cars his whole life outperformed one of the most powerful men on Wall Street? The answer isn't about how smart they were, it's about how they behaved. Doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. Today, we begin a masterclass in the invisible forces that control your financial destiny. Welcome to the channel. Today, we are starting a deep dive into the psychology of money by Morgan Housel. This book is a collection of 19 short stories exploring the strange ways people think about wealth, greed, and happiness. We are going to break it down chapter by chapter to help you master the mental game of money. Let's start. We like to think that money is like physics. We think it's governed by cold, hard rules and formulas. We assume that if you follow the correct math, you will get the correct result. But the first lesson Morgan Housel teaches us is that people do not make financial decisions on a spreadsheet. They make them at the dinner table. They make them based on their unique history, their worldview, and the specific era they were born into. Think about it this way: your personal experience with money probably makes up 0.1% of what's happened in the world, but it makes up about 80% of how you think the world works. If you were born in 1970, the stock market went virtually nowhere during your teens and 20s. But if you were born in 1950, that same market went up 10 times during your young adulthood. These two people will look at risk and investing in completely different ways. One isn't smarter than the other. They just have different software installed by their environment. Housel tells us that no one is crazy. This is a profound psychological shift. When we see someone buying a lottery ticket when they can barely afford rent, our first instinct is to judge. We say, that's a mathematically terrible decision. And it is, but through that person's eyes. A lottery ticket is the only time in their life they get to actually dream of having the things we take for granted. It's a possibility fee, not a math fee. Most of what we know about money is very new. Most of us are still using mental models from our grandparents' time. Even though the financial world has changed more in the last 20 years than in the previous 100, we are all, in a sense, financial toddlers, trying to figure out a very complex game with very little historical practice. The core of Chapter 1 is about financial empathy. Before you can fix your bank account, you have to understand the why behind your spending and saving. Are you saving because you want freedom? Or are you spending because you want to prove to the people from your past that you've made it? Every financial decision you've ever made sense to you at the moment you made it, given the information you had and your unique emotional state. When you realize that no one is crazy, you stop beating yourself up for past mistakes and you start looking at your behavior. As a scientist looks at an experiment, you realize that your neighbor's flashy car isn't necessarily a sign of wealth, but a sign of their specific psychological need for status and need. That might have been born from a childhood where they felt invisible. As we move through this book, remember this: the goal of understanding the psychology of money isn't to become a better mathematician. It's to become a more self-aware human being. Because at the end of the day, your wealth is simply the byproduct of your behavior. The chapter begins with the story of Bill Gates. Everyone knows Bill Gates is brilliant and worked harder than almost anyone. But Housel asks us to look at a hidden statistic. In 1968, there were roughly 303 million high school-aged kids in the entire world. Out of those 303 million, only about 300 kids attended Lakeside School in Seattle. Lakeside happened to be the only high school in the world that had a computer. If you were a teenager in 1968, the odds of you having access to a computer were literally 1 in a million. Bill Gates was that one. Gates himself admits, if there had been no Lakeside, there would have been no Microsoft. That is luck. It is the invisible force that pushes you forward when you didn't even know you were moving. But there is a second half to this story that nobody tells. Bill Gates had a best friend at Lakeside named Kent Evans. Kent was just as smart as Gates, just as obsessed with computers, and had the same 1 in a million luck to be at that school. Gates says Kent was actually the best student in the class. They planned to start a company together, but Kent Evans never got to start Microsoft. He died in a mountain climbing accident before he graduated high school. The odds of a high school student dying in a mountaineering accident are also roughly 1 in a million. That is risk. Luck and risk are the exact same thing. They are the reality that the world is too complex for 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes. They are the external forces that play a role in every financial story. Psychologically, we have a hard time accepting this. Why? Because it's uncomfortable. If we admit that luck played a role in our success, it makes our achievements feel less earned. And if we admit that risk played a role in our failures, it feels like we're making excuses. We tend to look at billionaires and try to copy their exact moves. We say, he woke up at 4 a.m. and bought this specific stock, so I should too. But we forget that for every person who did that and became a billionaire, there might be 1,000 people who did the exact same thing and went bankrupt because of a 1 in a million risk event. This is the selection bias of the human brain. We only study the survivors. We don't study the people who were just as smart as Bill Gates, but didn't happen to be in the right school in 1968. The lesson here isn't to give up because it's all luck. The lesson is to stay humble when things are going well and to be forgiving of yourself when things go wrong. When you judge your financial life, look for patterns, not individual results. One bad investment doesn't make you a failure, just like one Lucky Moon mission crypto coin doesn't make you a genius. As we navigate the psychology of money, we have to realize that the world is a giant, chaotic machine. You can do everything right and still lose. You can do everything wrong and still win. The goal is to build a life that can survive the risks and be ready to capture the luck when it eventually swings your way. The chapter begins with a story about a party hosted by a billionaire on Shelter Island. A guest mentions to Joseph Heller, the famous author of Catch-22, that their host, a hedge fund manager, made more money in a single day than Heller had made from his entire career with his best-selling book. Heller looked at his friend and said, "Yes, but I have something he will never have, enough." Enough is a word that the modern world hates. We are constantly told that more is always better. More money, more followers, more status. But Morgan Housel warns us that the hardest financial skill is getting the goalpost to stop moving. He tells the story of Rajat Gupta. Gupta was the CEO of McKinsey, a board member at Goldman Sachs, and had a net worth of roughly $100 million. For 99.9% of the planet, he had reached the finish line. But Gupta wasn't looking at the 99%. He was looking at the billionaires he sat next to in boardrooms. He wanted to be a billionaire too. This desire for more led him to trade inside information, which eventually landed him in prison and destroyed his reputation forever. Why do smart people do this? It comes down to social comparison. Psychologically, we don't judge our success in a vacuum. We judge it by looking at the person next to us. If you make $100,000 a year, but everyone in your neighborhood makes $100,000, you will feel poor. If you make $50,000, but everyone around you makes $30,000, you will feel like a king. So, social comparison is a ceiling that doesn't exist. There is always someone wealthier, faster, or more successful. Comparing yourself to a billionaire when you are a millionaire is like trying to chase the horizon. You can run forever, but you'll never reach it. The only way to win the game of social comparison is to stop playing it. Housel outlines 3 things that are never worth risking. No matter the potential gain, your reputation, your freedom, and your family. We often think that greed is about wanting to gain things. But deep psychology tells us that greed is actually a fear of missing out on status. It is an insecurity that tells us we are only as valuable as our bank balance compared to our peers. When you don't have a sense of enough, you start taking risks you shouldn't. You trade what you have and need for what you don't have and don't need. It is a mathematical tragedy. If you have $10 million and you risk it all to get $100 million, you are essentially risking your freedom for a luxury you won't even notice after a week. As we progress through this masterclass, ask yourself, Where is my finish line? If you don't define enough, you will spend your entire life working for a ghost. You will be a slave to the moving goalpost, and you will never experience the true wealth that Joseph Heller possessed, the peace of mind. That comes from knowing you have exactly what you need.